Folks, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you some information. Both myself and Phil are going to share some information of the schools, and from his perspective as city administrator, he's got a few slides that he wants to share with you with regards to in the county and looking at some other communities and what that impact is and what that means. So Phil, do you want me to go first? And all right, thank you. Such a gracious host over there. That was wonderful. Just to start, I'm getting a little concerned. This week is the third time I've been in a meeting with John Tackleberry. Is that a good thing or not? I'm not sure. I'm getting concerned, but it's been a pleasurable time working this week in sharing information. I had the opportunity Tuesday night to share with the City Council. Both myself and School Board member Lisa Seguin shared some information very, very similar to what you're going to hear today. First and foremost, I think it's not a news flash, especially to a number of people that have been living in this community for many, many, many years. But Delano Schools has had a tradition for a long, long time period of being an excellent school district. We've had that for well before I came here as high school principal 5 years. Lloyd Greep can attest to that as being back into the time period when he was here, and he worked with schools over the years, and there's several other people in this audience I know that have worked with schools that go back decades, and I think that that's an excellent thing, and it's a good thing to recognize and to be aware of. Just a couple of anecdotal measures to very briefly here to talk about what is educational excellence, and I can break it down into the 4 categories here. The elementary school has the highest MCA scores in MCA 2 history. MCA stands for Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment. It is the state testing assessment system that measures our students' proficiency, whether they're meeting the standards or not. In the elementary school, and when it's the number, Roman numeral number 2 behind it, that means it's in its second version, which means it's had ratcheted up standards due to mandates that we have through the federal government and also through the state government. So 94% in math and reading. It's the highest the elementary school students have achieved in the history of giving the test in the MCA 2s. So this is, we're moving in definitely the right direction when it comes to that. In the middle school, the QComp goal was met in math, and the QComp stands for Quality Compensation Program. This was a state program that was started by Governor Tim Pawlenty back about 10 years ago. And it was an effort to make sure that we are measured on our performance. There's a category in there on our performance within the school system, right down to that classroom, and it's measured by those MCA test scores. Each site has an opportunity to develop their own goal, has to be approved by the state, and it has to be approved by the school board and both the local and state agencies. And they chose math. That was an area that they wanted to make sure that they continued to work on. They actually blew their goal out of the water. They had an opportunity, and it was over several percentage points that we were able to do that. So these are quantifiable data information that tells us that we are achieving our foremost goal, which is educational excellence. In the high school, we're in the top 10%. Again, if you see all these letters, that's Education East. We're just guilty of all these types of letters put together. The MMR is actually a brand new system called the Multiple Measures Rating. And what that does is it takes multiple parts of your school based on those tests and combine them to have one final rating. It talks about graduation rates, the test scores, whether your proficiency, which means you meet or exceeds the standards on those tests. And if we took that multiple measure rating from the high school, we'd be in the top 10% of all the high schools in the state. That's great news for us. That's Delano. And that's been that way for a number of years. And I don't want to leave out community ed. Community ed sets the stage for the above to happen. We have a large number of students that go into our pre-K kindergarten programs, lots of different programs that are facilitated, and that really is an entry point for a number of our students that come into our school system. And so we've got a very, very healthy school district. We've always continued to, when I came here for 2 reasons. One, personally, because I wanted my children to be attending excellent schools and also to be in a community that was thriving, that was vibrant, that had many things going on. And I grew up in St. Paul, but I wanted to live a little bit more further out so I could still have that small community feeling. I also came here professionally. I came here 5 years ago as a high school principal. So I wanted to make sure that, and everything that I had envisioned of how Delano would be has come true. And then beyond my expectations, both personally and professionally. So I'm very, very proud of our school system. I'm proud of our community and all the partnerships that we have going on. We are now faced with a critical financial situation. We have a levy in place that's expiring at the end of this year. That's a 10-year-old levy that was passed by our citizens back in 2002. That levy represents about $1.1 million in revenue for our schools. That's the support that our community has been giving us over the last 10 years. Delano's expiring levy is lower than most of our neighboring districts. Okay, if you take a look at that, on the top of the list you have Orono, just to the east of us, Wayzata further east, Mount West Tonka. There's the state average in blue. And then you have Delano's expiring levy right here towards the bottom. And then obviously, I don't even want to consider this option, but that's where we would be at the end of this school year if we're not successful in our efforts this November. Okay? Now what this also shows you, and I just want to take 2 seconds to explain this. Over the last 20 years, the state government has attempted to, with great motivation and probably all the right reasons, to fund school districts based on the varying different needs that school districts are challenged with when educating our youth today, and even back 20 years ago. So there's what has happened with that. It has complicated the funding system so much that I almost equate it to the tax code of the federal government. And it changes biannually. So it's extremely difficult, and I actually spent about 3/4 of a workday with Tom Melcher, who's the Minnesota Department of Education State Finance Director, and with my business manager to go through all of these types of funding sources, and it's just amazing how complex it has grown. In that time period, and in their efforts to do this, what has happened, probably, hopefully, an unintended consequence, it has created where school districts have, because of a shortfall of state funding, have had to go to their community taxpayers to ask for support. 90% of our school districts in our state have levies in place. Okay? So, but what has happened with the varying different ways of state funding to meet the needs of all the school districts, from Duluth to Rochester to the Twin Cities to Railroad to Delano to Orono, there is the inequity in our funding. Okay? You got up here on the top Orono. That's the best that money can buy as a property-rich district. We're not a property-rich district. There is our reality. Okay? I equate the inequity in funding to be like this. If you can just imagine, to raise $1 through local property taxes, Orono runs one time around that track to get $1. Delano, for the same $1, has to run 3 times. There is the inequity. And that makes it difficult. And that's our reality. And we understand that. And we continue to have conversations. In fact, Tom Melcher and an entire committee is right now meeting to restructure how that education funding works, because they do realize, he would be the first one to realize, we've got an equity problem. We've got a funding gap between districts, and it's gotten very, very large, and it's extremely important that we take a look at that issue. What we've decided to do last fall, if you remember, we went out in the fall, in November of 11, and we asked our community for support to maintain our educational programs at that time. That levy failed by 159 votes. What we were required to do is we listened to our community, we tightened our belt, we reduced positions, class sizes increased, fees increased, which is never a good thing in public education. But we made sure that we were responsible to the words of our community members, and that we had to be fiscally frugal in making sure that decisions were made that we were educating our children, still meeting educational excellence, but having to do it with less money. We reduced, coming into this school year, $750,000 that was done in reductions and fee increases in those measures that were passed by the board last spring. Our questions are in two formats. There are two questions on the ballot. Okay? The first question is to renew the expiring levy. That has no tax impact. It's just to renew. Okay? The 10-year-old dollars that are there, $426, in fact, it's actually $426.86. That's what will appear on the ballot. And that's just to renew that levy. Okay? The second question, in order for us to maintain what we have right now, we can no longer exist in our financial situation due to the inadequacies of the state funding, as I explained, on that 10-year-old levy, that source of revenue. So we've decided to come out, and based on data that we did a research of our community. We took a sample population, and we had an in-depth phone survey that was done, and we've come up with the number of $325 per student just to maintain what we have. This isn't to build anything new. This isn't to create new programs. It's to maintain just what we have. Okay? The questions are contingent, which means that question 1 needs to pass for question 2 to pass. Okay? Question 1 needs to pass for question 2 to pass. What is the impact of each question on the taxpayers? Okay? The first question, there is no tax impact. The existing levy would be renewed at $426.86 per student. The second question, I've broken this down to residential conversation. On an average home with what Wright County has stated to be around the $220,000 mark, that's $12 a month of a tax impact. A couple of trips to McDonald's, maybe 4 trips to Dave's, okay? But that's the tax impact. Okay? John, as a business owner, always wants to know, don't give me that monthly stuff. I want annual. I want it to be, what is it per $100,000 of property tax? $72. He knows what his value is. He's a smart businessman. He can do the math. I'm here about just giving you the facts. And I want to make sure that I'm transparent and honest with all the information that I have. Both questions have to pass in order for us to maintain the educational excellence, to maintain those 94% rankings in the elementary, to continually to establish tradition of meeting and exceeding our goals in our school system. It is absolutely imperative that we maintain that excellence. Our community is supportive. Our community also has high expectations of what we do in educating our youth, because obviously a solid school system builds a solid community in many, many different ways. Just briefly, what happens if both questions fail? If question 1 fails, I've had to do some very serious work on finding out what it would mean to facilitate a school district with $1.1 million less in the budget. That means about 18 positions, 18 jobs. The average class size would probably move to 33. Electives would be cut, such as music, art, world languages, foreign languages. Middle school activities would go to community ed, which basically means the district no longer will support those middle school activities. They would have to be completely fee-based, so parents would have to foot the bill for the entire group. Okay? If a scenario comes out, if question 1 passes, but question 2 fails, I'm still making reductions. I need to make sure that I'm fiscally responsible as the superintendent of the schools to make sure that we have a balanced budget, that we have revenue and funding that's important to maintain our programs, so I'm going to have to continue. A potential of 10 jobs would be cut at that particular time. Obviously, the same would be for the remaining parts. I just wouldn't have to cut as many jobs. It is a critical situation. I came on new as superintendent July 2nd, Monday. I wish I had a year. I wish I had some more time to really get my feet wet in learning about this school district at a different level, but these are the facts. We are at a critical juncture, and I don't have a choice. Our levy's expiring. And so the board made some very difficult decisions back in June to establish what the questions would be on the ballot. What happens if both pass? I don't have to make any cuts. I'm not adding anything. I don't have to make any cuts. We are able to maintain our educational excellence at our current level of education. If you take a look about, the expenditures per student, this is how school districts measure their spending sides of things, okay? And when we compare ourselves to other school districts, you can see that this is the cost per student using data from 2010, which is the latest information that we have that is completely credible and validated by the state government, okay? And if you take a look at that, Monticello's up there. In the right-hand column, you see that they're spending approximately $10,847 per student. The state average is highlighted here in green. They're spending about $10,251 per student. Here's where Delano is at. We're $8,268.78. We facilitate educational excellence at an extremely low cost comparatively to school districts that are neighboring and other parts of the state. I would argue that we are all in this together. I would argue that a healthy school system, a healthy city's government, a healthy business community, we are all in this together. And it's important that we realize as a community, we depend on each other. We have dependencies. The city and the school work quite a bit together with regards to city and government type entities. We enjoy those wonderful partnerships that we can establish with our business communities. Members here from Silpro. Silpro's been an unbelievable supporter of our schools. We have a FIRST robotics team that competes at the state and national level because of those business relationships. We have a Project Lead the Way, which is an engineering curriculum that's project-based and building all sorts of different things within the curriculum, giving these students the experience that they need to enter into either further education or that workforce to be successful, hopefully back in our community. And that's because of the partnerships of the businesses that are over in Industrial Park. That's valuable. That's important. So with that, I would encourage you to be informed. I encourage you to get involved. I am available at all times, night and day, to answer any questions that anyone may have. And from my perspective and from the school system's perspective, I want to thank you very much for listening.